So my name is Marianne from Bochove. I'm, as Sebas already mentioned, an assistant professor at the Erasmus School of Health Policy and Management. So you might wonder, what does this have to do with expats? Well, in my previous career, I was a PhD student in the sociology department, and my PhD thesis was about the local and cross-border ties of highly skilled migrants in Rotterdam and The Hague. And I wrote this book about that. And nowadays I'm studying health policy and still also diversity issues within health policy, and also migrants working in healthcare. But now I will talk about my PhD thesis with you. And I would like to start with a question. So if you all have your phones with you, I'm sure you have, you could visit the following website. So this is one of the questions that I asked expats in Rotterdam and The Hague that we interviewed for the study about their self-identity, their primary self-identity. So the question is, what do you feel yourself to be in the first place? And you have various options that you can choose, and then if you all can give me a sign if you have filled it in, then we can look at the results. Oh. Okay.
Oh, nee, ik heb dit niet.
Okay. Can you read the options? Well, they're still working on the code, so I think they are not there yet. Yeah? You all did it? Okay, and I will now see the results. Oh, so it's very diverse. It's a bit difficult to draw any conclusions from this. Only that there are 4 Europeans, and actually in my study, almost no one said they felt, or even 5 Europeans, and almost no one felt European. So I'm not sure what that says about my respondents and about you. But it does.
Maybe Rotterdam is really different than Eindhoven.
Maybe that's the case, or maybe also because maybe people coming from European countries here, and in my research there were also people coming from all over the globe, and I'm not sure that people coming from American, maybe they would feel European here. I'm not sure. But it is nice to see that it's very diverse, because this is also this is also what I found in my research, that it's really difficult to say in general what people feel themselves to be, and probably for you it's the same as for my respondents, that they say it also depends where I am, what I feel like. So maybe in the Netherlands I feel something different than in another country, or in Eindhoven I feel different than being in Amsterdam. Okay, so I will show you the results of. So I asked my respondents in the research the same question, and this was what they answered. Well, there are 8 people said European, but what I found very surprising was that 31 of the respondents, so the mixture of that's the largest category, said that they actually felt like a homeland citizen, so like an American or an Englishman, or from India or China. That national identity was very important for people, and this was not really similar to what I found in the literature, in the academic literature, but also in popular literature about expats. So that's what I want to briefly discuss with you. These two stereotypical images of expats that are found in academic literature. And these are that expats are like cosmopolitans who feel that the world is their home and they feel at home everywhere, and they like encountering differences and like to travel, and yeah, they don't have really their roots somewhere, but they feel at home everywhere. That's how it's presented in the literature. And the other image is that expats are like organization men and women who primarily identify with their organization or as an expat. And also, I did see in my research that people said I feel like an expat, but it was not the largest category that we found. So I was a bit surprised by this, and I've further studied what people gave, what reasons people gave for saying that they are in one category or another. Well, this is just my personal interest also in this issue, because my grandparents were also expats in Curaçao. My grandfather worked for Shell there, and they were actually living in an expat bubble. So I think that you could classify this, and this is what also can be found in the literature, and it happened back then as well. So they lived in a really white community. The church was white. The school where my mother went was also only filled with Dutch white children. So this is really the typical image of the expat bubble. But now I want to show you some examples of the findings of my research which did not match these stereotypical images. So this is the first one is that people who I interviewed were not cosmopolitans who said I feel at home everywhere. So this is a quote from a woman from the UK. And she says, it's really a nice experience to be here, but I like to be with my friends and family. It's kind of difficult to feel that this is your real home. Also, it has to do with language, which is my fault, but the cultures are just different. So instead of celebrating these differences, she says that these differences make it really difficult to feel at home here. So she didn't really see herself as a cosmopolitan. And the second stereotypical image of people enjoying their life in the expat bubble, well, I found that many people do live in a kind of an expat bubble. Their friends are mainly from the same country or the same organization that they work for, but they are not really enjoying this very much, all of them. But, many of them said that they actually prefer to also have more mixed contacts and to have Dutch friends. So some of them said, well, it's not that we prefer an expat bubble, there is a Dutch bubble and it's very difficult to enter the Dutch bubble. So they said, the Dutch stay too much in their own communities. So instead of the expats staying too much in their communities, it are the Dutch who stay in their communities too much. And people said, and that was also often heard, both from, I also spoke with more traditional migrant groups in the Netherlands, the Turkish, Moroccan, Surinamese migrants, and they said the same thing, that the Netherlands is kind of a closed society. So if you are a white ethnic Dutch, it's very easy to feel at home here, but if you have a different background, although we might say that we are so that we are inclusive society, that it's actually not so much the case that that all people are so welcoming for migrants. So I would like to, this was also one of my conclusions, that apart from these stereotypical images, to introduce a third image, and that's the expat as a local citizen who faces some of the similar problems that other migrants face. And this is an example of a quote. A person said that she likes to live here, and she also put some effort into learning the language, and that it takes some energy to integrate somewhere. And she doesn't only want to put energy in it, but she wants also something in return. So she felt that she should live here a bit longer to integrate and to really feel at home here. And that also was a reason for her to not wanting to move from one country to another, and that this also limited her mobility a bit. She wanted to stay at one place and get to know the place, and really integrate here. So that was for me a big surprise, because I thought expats are people who are moving from one place to another and do not really seek such local bonding. But my research showed that they actually do find that important. So this is the alternative view on expats. And I was also asked to conclude with a question, and my question was, what can the Dutch do? So the Dutch is also, of course, it's also a very diverse group, but what can they do to make expats feel more at home? Because often we might think, what should the expats do themselves to make this their home? But I think it must come from two ways. So I would be very interested to hear from internationals what they think the Dutch should do differently to make it more easy to integrate here. So that's my introduction. It's a bit more than 5 minutes, I think.
Thank you, Marianne. Then we have Jakob Wedemeijer. Formerly, he was working as a lawyer, specialized in asylum and immigration law, right? But he succeeded beyond Advocaat as the alderman of Active City Diversity and Permits in 2016. You can probably better introduce yourself.
Well, that's true. I think I've been an immigration lawyer for 17 years, I think. So I experienced personally the introduction of the highly skilled migrants program here in Holland, because the Dutch economy wanted and needed new expats to support, because the Dutch, even the Europeans, could not provide sufficient highly skilled migrants. So that was a very new thing for us, because the immigration law in Holland is mostly no unless, and it means you're not allowed to enter Holland unless you have a very specific reason to do so. And I think it's very important that we have to realize that migrants are coming here with a certain expectation, and this expectation might not be the actual experience they will have. And that's where most of the problems come. And I would like to mention about 4 major groups which we have here in Eindhoven, which have certain expectations. Of course, you have the expat community, and they have been recruited by ASML or any other big major company here. They have a certain expectation of why they're coming here with their families or without their families. That's very important. But we have also here the East European workers who come here with a certain expectation. They want to do the harvest work or work in construction, so they have a certain expectation also of the Dutch society. We have also refugees and asylum seekers who have a completely different kind of expectation here in Holland. And last but not least, the highly skilled migrant programs. And all those 4 groups have also the family reunifications, because the spouses of any of these groups have different expectations of what they're going to do. I can give you an example by that. I have supported many family reunifications here in Holland. And there was one very traditional guy from Morocco, and he married a woman in Morocco and expected that you stay as traditional as she was in Morocco. Then she came here, she said, well, I'm now in the West, I have more liberty now. So this made a very big clash within the marriage, because the man expected that she would stay traditional. But because of the different society in Holland, the spouses react differently here. And it's, I can imagine it's not only for a ordinary family reunification, but for any of these groups, the change of surroundings has also an impact on your marriage, on your family life, which gave, and that was my other specialty, a great number of divorces. So sometimes I entered the people, I helped them enter, and after a couple of years they came to me for the divorce, because the marriage and the whole immigration adventure collapsed and went wrong.
Did you stay in contact with them, and do you know what happened afterwards? For example?
After the divorce, do you mean? Or
after divorces?
Sometimes, because you have also these very horrific clashes about the children. So sometimes a family or the members of the family stays for years with the law firm in different categories of specializations. Yes.
given your previous occupation, do you attach extra value to the comfort of newcomers in Eindhoven within your work?
Because if we don't do it, it will be very expensive afterwards, because all the problems will occur of, now it starts with psychiatric problems, but also divorces or children who are not integrated, which gives reason for all kind of juvenile measures from the government. So if we don't integrate as fast as possible, because from the point of view of the migrant there are also difficulties, then we will have very costly procedures afterwards.
And how do you implement that in your personal efforts?
Well, I'm a lawyer of diversity. I'm an alderman of diversity. Integration is another field of expertise, of course. But what we try to do for the expats, but also for all the different types of migrants, is to develop policies that they will easily be equipped to deal with the problems in Holland themselves, because we can't do it for them. They have to do it themselves, but we have to show and enlighten the way how you can integrate in Dutch society, which is of course very difficult. For any newcomer, I think, any part of the world, it's difficult to integrate in a new society, in a new culture.
And if we speak about all those different groups of newcomers, expats, refugees, migrant workers, how low or high skilled, I think the mayor, your colleague, he put it really nicely that Eindhoven is a city of a lot of different paces.
Yes.
Things are moving in very different
Sometimes
speeds.
I see it in my work. I had sometimes the experience discussing with highly skilled migrants in the morning and going to a very typical Brabant, Eindhoven community where you think, well, they have not seen a migrant ever, and with a completely different kind of culture. And sometimes it even clashes in my head because, yeah.
But with such different speeds in development throughout the city, how do you secure that inclusiveness within your efforts for an active and diverse city?
Well, that's very difficult because I can't secure anything.
No.
Because we are just the gemeente, the municipality. But of course, we need more than ever, and I think in the next period we should improve our efforts. We need to support the migrants in finding their ways, and that's about jobs, it's about education, it's also about how to integrate and mix with the Dutch. And I think we need to find examples of migrants, highly skilled migrants, lowly skilled migrants, refugees, who have done this whole process, so they can advise newcomers where these processes will face difficulties. And I think even you have to do it by nationality, because someone from India is completely different than someone from Somalia or even from Eastern Europe. They have difficult problems. There are many migrants who don't even master English, and then it's very difficult to integrate in that society. Really.
Amongst the topics in your wallet is the inner city of Eindhoven.
Yes. Well, yeah. Okay. Yes.
The binnenstad.
Binnenstad.
Recently, many plans to improve this inner city have been made public. There are even a lot of open calls for ideas to improve this inner city. How do you warrant a diverse inner city for everyone?
You mean, how can we secure that there is diversity in the inner city? Well, that's a very difficult one, because what we at this moment do is have major projects here in the city, which will change the view of the city completely. You know, the whole station will change dramatically, and all other parts of the city, inner city, will also change. We have this small discussion about inclusiveness in the inner city, but it's very difficult because you mentioned before our meeting here that diversity, like other type of shops here in the inner city, would improve diverseness. But it's very difficult because of the raising prices here for shops. So I think it's a very interesting idea, but to be quite honest, it's very difficult to secure it because the free market is here, and yeah, the free market has its own ways of doing things, and yeah, you have to make money about it.
What I said before we started, what I talked about was that there is such a low concentration of shops and stores with a non-European focus in the inner city. Those are mainly concentrated around the Kruisstraat and the Edisonstraat. I think if you're gonna make changes, it could be nice to include them or support them in a kind of way, but I understand that money is a big issue. One more question for you. When
a nice Indian shop would be great.
Yeah.
We have this special team, acquisition team, which is a team of the gemeente, of the municipality, which actively tries to get certain shops here to this inner city. And it would be a good idea if we have a discussion also about the diversity of the shops, because they have a very specific idea, but it also includes very major brands and whatever to enhance the number of visitors to Eindhoven. But we should also think about the inhabitants of Eindhoven, including the expats and the other migrants. Yeah.
When you are planning for this,
I would like to ask you, like as a lawyer, if you can explain me the difference between expat and migrant. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's
well, migrants, in my view, are the major term, and I think you should make a diversion between the type of migrants who come here with a special purpose. So the highly skilled migrants who are, for example, coming to study here or coming to work at ASML is a completely other type of migrant than the refugee who seeks protection and safety. They have a different view of why they're coming to Holland. Yeah?
Are there more questions? It's free to ask questions, of course. I would like to go back to this planning of the city. It's a bit a personal question for me, but while you are planning for a new inner city, do you also look at cities from abroad and take examples from that?
We are not looking at cities as such because we have to be honest, Eindhoven has how many inhabitants? 230 or something like that. Eh? And to compare with London or Berlin would be a little bit out of reach. But of course we're looking for good examples.
Yeah, but what I'm more aiming at is, for example, like the Asian energy, for example, that you get on a street is so completely different than the energy when you're walking through the Damer.
You mean in major cities like Mumbai or Jakarta? Or?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
We need a sun as well.
The culture is also completely different because in many of these collectivist countries, people live on the street or more on the street, or they are forced to live on the street. Let's not idealize the thing. And here in Holland, we live more behind the curtains, as I would say, more individualized or in family. So it's different, yes. Quite funny, today I received a complaint from the existing entrepreneurs in the inner city that they complained about all these small entrepreneurs who sell pancakes or whatever they do in these small carts, and they felt that I should do something about it because it took away their business. So you can have different views. But here you can see the newcomers have to fight themselves inside the inner city, literally, and the old comers, they have to give some space because otherwise we cannot stay together.
Do you have anything to add to that? Is there a question that I should have asked but didn't?
Well, what I would like to ask the expat community, of course, you face a lot of difficulties. I can imagine if you come from India and you are the spouse of somebody who works all day in ASML and you are alone in New Woensel North or something like that, then it's very difficult. And I think you need to get out of the house and to do something. It doesn't matter what. If you go to the school and help with reading, or go to a study, or try to find work yourself, because there are a lot of English surrounds work, which I think it's very important to do. And even if it's only 8 hours, it's something which you can do to start integrating. But I would also emphasize that other types of migrants face a lot of more difficulties, because if you are traumatized, or if you are from Eastern Europe and you have not really a lot of money, you face a lot more. And I hope we can integrate more, not completely of course, because the groups are quite different, but integrate more these type of groups, and these groups can help each other a little bit more. Then we can integrate all the experiences, how to enter the Dutch bubble, because it is a Dutch bubble, that's true.
This takes also a lot of more energy from the Dutch population. I think there should be a lot more volunteers
there is at this moment a bigger part of the Dutch who are not really interested in other people at this moment, and they feel threatened by the other migrants, or they are hostile to other migrants because they don't understand the culture. It needs a lot of patience, but of course, integration is a two-way process. So, also the Dutch, and they change, but it's not as fast as we are hoping for.
That brings me to a question to Marianne. You have done quite some research in the field of volunteer work as well. Immigrants, expats, and especially refugees rely greatly on volunteers and citizens' initiatives for good integration. And in the public for sociale vraagstukken, you questioned whether there is maybe too much responsibility on the shoulders of the volunteers. I was wondering, how do you think that this affects the volunteer work within the field of integration?
Oh yeah, that's a very interesting question. I actually only studied volunteers in healthcare, so a bit in community centers as well. So and I also discuss this issue sometimes with people who work in projects that are directed to migrants. And I think it's very it's a broad trend in healthcare, but in all kinds of fields in society, that we expect more from volunteers or unpaid workers instead of professional paid workers. And in many fields you see that some volunteers really like that, and they also are capable of doing that, but you also see quite often that people think it becomes a burden, and they get too much responsibility, and they also feel responsible for the problems of others, and they also the problem of others becomes their own problem, and then a volunteer can also get a burnout or feel incapable or want to quit volunteering because it's just becoming too much.
And those negative stories from volunteers about volunteering don't especially make other people enthusiastic to go.
No.
I think that's kind of a problem.
What kind of volunteer positions are you guys talking about?
Well, you have many initiatives around the city. For example, Jongerenhuis here close to the Design Academy, where certain activities are being planned for people who are new here and don't really know how to get around yet.
So the Dutch government sort of organizes volunteers in order to help people integrate in that way?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Another question. In your article, Beyond Cosmopolitanism and Expat Bubbles Challenging Dominant Representations of Knowledge Workers and Trading Spouses,
That's correct.
you argue that the similarities between expats and other types of migrants are perhaps more prevalent than the differences between them. I was wondering if you could maybe explain that a little bit.
Yeah, it's partly also in the presentation, because I saw that these types of migrants are discussed in very different fields of literature. So when we talk about expats, it's all about cosmopolitanism and organizations, and when we talk about traditional migrants, it's about homeland ties and that these people have lower incomes or something. And they are seen as sometimes in the political debate also the good and the bad migrants. But also in the academic literature, they are seen as really different. And what I actually found was that they, with regards to their identity, their practices in the city, their ties to the homeland, but also to other parts of the world, that they are, in many ways more similar than we expected. Of course, there are important differences. And I totally agree with you that some migrants have a more difficult position. If you have no money and you don't speak the language and you have some psychological problems, then it's more difficult even than if you are a woman, a wife of a well-paid worker, for instance. But in their practices and identities, I saw a lot of similarities.
Do you think then they would benefit from a more similar kind of treatment by government instances?
Well, in the Netherlands, nowadays we don't see the treatment of the government with regard to migrants as really successful. Well, many people don't see it like that, so I'm not sure if we should do it in similar ways. But actually, I did recommend some kind of buddy programs for expats, similar to like often that's also done by volunteers, but that's the type of work volunteers can do, I think, is when, for instance, helping young, what they also do in community centers where, for instance, Turkish children with the language, or with the Dutch language problems are helped by Dutch students, for instance, to learn the language better. And we often think that such projects are good for migrants with some problems, but maybe expats also face similar problems with with their communication with Dutch and integrating in Dutch society, and they could also use someone who is experienced.
That's a really reoccurring thing in this conversation with the two of you already, and also in our research, that many newcomers would really benefit from getting into contact with locals more often than they do. But still they find that difficult, as you also argued in interview with Vrij Nederland. You say that expats find it hard to make friendships with locals.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Is it just a language barrier, or?
Yeah, well, what I heard often is that they say, well, I like that the Dutch speak English so well, because if you want to know the directions on the street, or you're in a shop, people can help you, and so for that kind of thing, it's very nice that the Dutch speak English, but many of them said, well, if you really want a friendship, you should talk Dutch. And in parties, for instance, when you join a party, then they start in English, but then at some point they are going to speak Dutch, and then they talk about different topics, and then it's more difficult to follow it as an outsider. But they said it's not only the language, it's also what they said to me was that when you come here in your 30s or 40s, that many other people, the Dutch in their 30s or 40s, already have their friendships, they have their social networks, they're quite stable social networks, and not all the Dutch are open to have another friend in their network. So they said that it's quite naturally you go to other expats who have the same experience, because they do want to have a friendship and a weekly or daily contact, and the Dutch don't need that because they already have their networks. And final thing is what was also said, that the Dutch are maybe a bit more individualistic than many of the migrants coming here, who also appreciate that going for dinner after work, and then the Dutch say, well, no, I have to return home. So these were some of the issues that people face.
Brings me to the last question, and that's not only directed to you, but maybe to the both of you and to the audience as well. How do you think we can stimulate locals to seek contact with newcomers? Because I think it is obviously very beneficial for a newcomer to get this contact, but still the Dutch seem more reluctant to seek this contact than vice versa. But how do you think we could stimulate that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because also at work in Rotterdam at the university, we also have international academics, and I also when I was writing this research, I recommended the Dutch to keep more contact with the internationals. But then I thought about my own behavior in my university, and actually we see the same thing. The internationals lunch with the others, and so it even on such a micro level, it's difficult. But I think if they in my university, for instance, they would say, well, we find it important that these contacts are established, and please, for instance, I had contact with an academic from the UK, and it seemed that she also wanted to speak Dutch, and we could have done more to help her, I think. And maybe if the policymakers in organizations also stimulate those contacts between workers, that might already help. And otherwise, I think of course, we ask a lot from volunteers, and also not every volunteer likes to have contact with migrants. But I think if you see the many volunteers in the vluchtelingenwerk, for instance, they often have too many volunteers instead of too few. So, and I think that many people would be interested in having contact with an expat, but don't know how. So either from both ways, no, exactly. So from both ways, they don't know how, and I think organizations could play a role in that. But how exactly?
To offer right. But for example, yes.
Along these lines, is it really necessary to have contact with locals? Like.
Oh well, if no,
because,
no.
I mean, could it phrase it like if expats have contact with locals, they will be more happy or more satisfied. But at the end, it's maybe the husband and the wife that resolve the whole Moroccan thing, and they don't end up divorcing. It's already something positive for them. So is the interaction or integration really the reason for people to be happy or feel fine in an environment?
Yes. Yes, if your plan is to stay here in Holland. So, and that's what I'm talking about, the expectation. Which kind of expectation do you come? If you're planning to work for 5 years here at ASML, and then you go to another branch of ASML in another place, then you have a different way of integrating than if you come here as a refugee and you seek protection. You have not the intention to return to home at all because the situation is there. And what you see here is that also expats along the way decide to stay here because of the children, because of the income, of the increase in income here, which they expect. So I think if you are isolated within your group, within your nationality, in the end you will be not as happy if you are integrated.
Well, yeah, I agree, but it does. In terms of integration, it's not necessarily that it's with Dutch, but it could be with an expat that does it, or the teacher of the kid. That could also. So that interaction with other human beings.
But in my research, people are really said we also want the contact with the Dutch. So my conclusions were also based on what people told me themselves, that they didn't only want to live in the Netherlands, but they will also like to feel part of the Netherlands, and they thought that feeling would become more intense if they also had local friends. So, but my suggestion would not be to force people to get more Dutch friends, of course. But if they, if they want that, then we should maybe facilitate it a bit more.
Isn't it a question of belonging? If you belong somewhere, that you make friends either international local friends or local or Dutch local friends. And if you feel you belong, you're part of the, and you get to know the Dutch culture, that you understand it better, that you feel more at home, and that you are willing to stay longer, and that it's better for the local economy as well, for the people and for the economy as well.
But then to follow on your comment, I would like to also question the word of integration actually, because sometimes I feel it's a bit from like an arrogant position to talk about integration, because integration for me always means like to integrate something foreign and something existing, and sometimes I feel this is not really taking us anywhere anymore because of this world coming closer together more and more and more, so maybe we really should like not use this word at all, like maybe this is so much more about meeting in the middle. I don't know if it's clear, but yes.
Of course, it works both ways. As we said before, we have to be the Dutch people. We have to be open, and immigrants or other people, they have to, I think, also try to kind of understand the Dutch culture and comply with it in a way. If you want to live here.
I mean, I'm from Germany, I can only speak for Germans, and I think it's similar maybe to the Netherlands, but sometimes I feel many people are not interested in this accepting something different in their culture, like they don't want to make a step towards something coming in the country. I mean, I'm not talking for everyone, of course, but sometimes I feel also this, where this nationalistic trend also comes from.
And what's in it for me? You always want to do things that are close to you, and when you are curious and you want to find out, you go to seek other people and get acquainted. And when you don't want it, you want only your family, then it's not racist or whatever, but no interest.
Yeah, true.
So a question in the back?
I'm wondering also in the line of integration, like incivilization, or is it the goal, or are there different levels of integration? Like, you know,
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yes, different levels of integration. So reading, talking, professional efficiency, whatever. When you interview people, you mention that they say they want to be integrated in the society. But can you class them maybe? Is it possible at all?
Well, I focus now mainly on what we call the social cultural integration of the social networks people have, the relationships they have with other people. But we actually in the research we focused on many different aspects. So economic integration, and when we in the past talked about integration, we mainly mentioned we refer to socio-economic integration of migrants with lower incomes or no jobs, and they should integrate. But nowadays, when we talk about integration, it's much more about the cultural part. And for these expats, of course, the economic question is not really an issue because many have a really good income. Although they also, in the literature, it's also a bit exaggerated what how rich these people often are, because it's also kind of a middle class actually. But it's not a question of economic integration. But we also looked at political integration. Do they feel they have influence on the policies here? And also so the cultural integration, so do you know the language, the social integration, do you have activities here, but also through consumption, for instance, you can also integrate it by going to the movies or going to the restaurant. And people some people are mainly a local citizen as a consumer here in the Netherlands, and I'm it's not my role to judge any of those types of integration, so that's also not my position in this, that I think people should do more this or that, but mainly what people told me that they would prefer to be more part of this community that was mainly the cultural community in the Netherlands, and that was failing for them. And yeah, so it didn't meet their expectations, and that's also agree with the alderman that it's really a lot about expectations. If you come here for half a year and you don't have any expectations of this local integration, or however you call it, incorporation or embeddedness, then yeah, it is not a problem. But if you want to stay here longer and you really have higher expectations, then yeah, then it can be really disappointing staying here. I hope that answers the question.
Is there more questions? Yeah.
Thank you. What kind of start your research or your work did you identify things which were common between multiple kinds of migrants and the Dutch people? Because maybe bringing out the common things and having events around them is what will bring them together. Otherwise, there's going to be always migrants, Dutch, and there are Dutch. Migrants are trying to gain their attention. I have seen dynamics where we could actually become competitors because, oh, Dutch, there are a few people around and there are so many migrants. So if I want to get around, read my community belastingdienst letter, I'm with the help of a Dutch colleague or a Dutch friend. So how am I going to impress this person? You know, I have to impress this person better than the rest so that this person is going to talk to me. So it's going to build competitiveness, which is unhealthy. If there is going to be a public way or governmental way of helping out, then this competition is going to reduce. Both are going to be like at the same level, wherein they have common things to discuss about, rather than actually needing something from the other.
Sure. No, not really, she's true. Yeah, you've also to see there are different Dutch people, because there are many categories of Dutch people. You might think it's one category of Dutch people, but if you are inside the Dutch bubble like me, you can diverse between, because there is, for example, a major difference between the people in the Randstad in Holland and the other parts of Holland, also culturally and even politically. You see already differences. You have differences between highly skilled and lowly skilled migrants. So we should also try to make the connection. If you are highly skilled migrants, you can maybe connect easier with highly skilled Dutch. If you are a lower skilled migrant, you can easier connect with lower skilled Dutch. But what I also wanted to say is don't wait for the Dutch, because they will not come to you. You have to come to them. Do voluntary work. If you're single, date with the Dutch. Really.
If you're single, you have more opportunities probably. So I was.
Yeah, well, you see a lot of migrants who want to have the same type of nationality in the marriage, and of course I understand that. But from the point of view of integration, it's less desirable. But
if I'm already married. If I'm already married.
Yeah, if you're already married, then I should not date. But it's up to you, of course. And do voluntary work. And do collective sports, for example. If you are together in a soccer team or in a hockey team or in a cricket team, which not consists only of Indian people or other Anglo-Saxon people, then you have more types of integration. And be smart about that.
What bugs me is that the Dutch don't come to them.
That's true.
Yes, that's true. That we do complain about them not being integrated.
Well, this arrogantness, which somebody mentioned there, because we are here and we are in a major culture and they have to integrate our culture. This is a type of argument which you hear a lot. And especially though in these times in Europe, not only Holland, but also in Germany and also in England, we have these nationalist parties. We have two now in Holland, who are very much in trying to get one homogenic Dutch culture, which means this. And we all have to abide this type of Dutch culture, which is not my Dutch culture, because I think we have very different Dutch cultures and I would like to keep them differently. Like in Limburg or in Friesland or in Holland. These are very different types of Dutch cultures, which I hope we will maintain and not to be one homogenic block of Dutch people.
Time for a last question, and then I would like to go for food.
Maybe I can.
I don't have a question for the lady. We're sitting here in the Hub. Are you familiar with the Hub?
No, not that much. I visited the website and saw what kind of activities are
If
here.
you look outside on the sign, it says the Hub where expats feel at home. That's exactly the question that you have there. We are a foundation that started 7 years ago, founded by a local and an international. And we cater for internationals to help them settle in, feel at home in a safe environment. And we do that with volunteers, with the support of the community. We have roughly 25,000 people that come here every year, participate in Dutch classes, improvisation, comedy nights, quiz nights. The bars is open, a lot of
Dance
activities.
classes.
Sorry?
Also dance classes.
And dance classes, music is strangers, guitar lesson, game nights on Monday evening. We have big events, a lot of activities that we organize, mainly for internationals, but we also invite locals to participate. And as I said, we have a group of roughly 50, 60 volunteers who all make that happen. Are we on the right track? Do you have advice for us? What can we do better? Is this the right way to help people to feel belonging to the local society?
Can I answer that question?
No, I you cannot answer.
But can I comment after?
Yeah.
You can also start if you like.
No.
Based on what you organize here, I think that's very interesting, and also, maybe this is what it was also said. You need to organize things that are interesting for both groups, and not all the time talk about, oh, you are Marianne and I'm a Dutch person, but a shared interests and shared activities that people also look behind the expat and see the person who is there, and the other way around as well, so that you also see the diversity in the Dutch people. So if this is the place where people can meet each other, then I think that is the right way to go. But I'm not familiar enough with the organization to really give recommendations for what you could do different or not. But it seems to me this is not what I saw in Rotterdam. I don't think they have such a thing.
No, that was my question.
Yeah.
Are you aware of other cities where they have a foundation as we are that caters for international and helps them with their living in process? Are there any other?
I think many municipalities now have an expat help desk or something, but this is mainly for the practical things and not. And I interviewed migrants or expats from The Hague and Rotterdam, and those in Rotterdam often complained that there was not such a community or help for expats as it is there in The Hague. So you see differences, but. I think, Eindhoven is maybe, they also mentioned in the policy makers in Rotterdam that Eindhoven is a bit ahead to Rotterdam in this respect.
Thank you.
Okay, but you can...
I will come to you after.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to
What
answer
did-
the question.
Okay, one more.
Because I think a good answer would be to actually ask the expats. I think it's an absolutely wonderful initiative that the Hub is existing.
Thank you.
Because I must actually say even many Dutch people, they started liking to come here to actually see that they themselves were feeling strange in Netherlands, and they started feeling appreciated. That way, I think Hub is really nice.
Well, we try our best, but if we can learn from others to be even better, then we're open to it.
Yeah, what I want to add is that we actually are very desperate in need of hubs for other types of migrants as well. So for the East Europeans, this is a great issue at this moment here in Eindhoven. Maybe you have heard about in some parts of Eindhoven there are people really protesting against how do you call it in English? Well, there are many homeowners who rent out or sell out parts of the houses to East Europeans, also students, and the locals, they do not want to have more people in their streets. So we have this integration, the discussion of integration, very strong and severely now, also in politics. And I think for refugees we also really need more hub type of initiatives, because we're very, sometimes also very lonely here in Eindhoven, also in the rest of Holland. So we need more hubs, but you cannot mix them because the groups are so differently. But that it would be great if we could have more kind of initiatives about that.
As a program manager of the Hub, I do see that sometimes mixing does work. For example, this weekend we have a large Polish charity event, which also attracts regular customers of the Hub, Dutchies, the whole community, and that's the nice part.
That's what we need.
Yeah, we have music from the Orient, we have music from Latin America, we have all sorts of international groups approaching us now more and more to come with their own initiatives and to create the feeling you mentioned. So that what you just said is the best compliment.
If it's possible to have a more broad activities than just the expats, this would be also
because great. They're all in the same position. They're all new. They all want to belong. They all need to find the way to the bus.
The strange thing is, in certain countries, they can be of different categories, but from the same country. So, like from Iraq or from Afghanistan, you have all kind of different people. If we look at them, they are all from this part of the country, so they can help each other also. That if we could make such kind of connections, it will already be great and very helpful in the integration of digital persons.
Going to your question, I was just thinking about it as we're speaking about it. It could be that then, if you wanted to have more integration of other types of immigrants, perhaps rethink the term expat, because that's already inclusive.
Agreed. International.
We recently had a discussion in the board of the foundation about how we should position the identity of the Hub in the future. And we basically took the word expat out and talk about internationals.
Internationals.
And yes,
that's great.
For everybody. Everybody who has an international connection, who feels part of a bigger thing, who comes from a different place and want to belong to a international community, that's who we cater for. It still says expats on the outside. We need to change that with the support of the Reneman and some other people. We're going to renovate both the interior and the exterior of the Hub, and then we will also take care of the fact that expats was the starting point. So now we want to basically connect the local community and the international community in a safe, happy, friendly environment where you can interact and learn from each other. And have a good time.
Yeah, like Carnival, for example. Please. I'm from Amsterdam, and last year was my first Carnival. I had this immigration experience here because the whole city was different. And I think it's very interesting to participate just to see how the Dutch are connecting with each other and discussing with each other. It's very one of the typical Dutch culture.
We're going to include it in one of the welcome events.
Yeah, great.
So perhaps you can join as well.
Yeah, if I have time, I will.
Okay, can I get a big round of applause for Marianne and Jakob? Then I would like to welcome to the stage Mohammed to maybe explain something about your food.
I am Mohammed from Syria. I am living in Eindhoven since 3 years, in Netherlands, sorry. And today I prepared for you something from the Syrian kitchen. It's vegetarian and vegan, and for the people who like to eat something with the meat also, I prepared something. I live here since 3 years. I'm doing industrial engineering and management, and by Noor and the other guys, we tried to make this event to talk about the refugee and the integration here in Netherlands. What? Yes. And I started the catering since 1 year ago almost. I'm doing Syrian food with the Syrian traditional events here at the Hub and the other locations around the city to connect with people together. Yes, that is it.
So there's just a buffet, so everybody in their own pace can go and grab something. And then after the food, we will do some workshops for the interested people.